in 47 states and Canada. Before they begin, please note that you may submit questions at any time during the presentation. These questions will then be asked during our brief question and answer period following the conclusion of today's presentation. You can take part in the conversation by typing your question and then submitting it. A little later, we will also ask you to please take part in an immediate feedback 3-question poll toward the end as well. With that, we are extremely pleased to be joined today by our presenters. Andrea and Andy, the floor is yours.
Curtis, thank you very much. I'm Andy Robinson, everyone, and my colleague Andrea. You'll hear her voice in a moment. I want to set the context for today's webinar. We understand that all of the benefit auctioneers on this call work often with nonprofit boards and volunteers. Often the success of your auctions are dependent on the ability of those volunteers to do good work and follow through on their commitments. And so we're here to help you learn how to engage board members and other volunteers more effectively so they can help you do your job more effectively. We're going to teach you a training model. And the idea here is that part of your role, and I would have to say whether you like it or not, is to help these volunteers and board members do their work better. And you may find yourself in the role as a trainer and support person for them. So we want to teach you a model for doing that more effectively. And as part of the webinar, we're going to give you a sample exercise from a new book that we've published recently called Train Your Board and Everyone Else to Raise Money. So, Curtis, would you give us the next slide, please? And Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hi everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I don't know where you are. I guess you're all spread out all over the country? Well, I'm here in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, would you believe? And the weather is gorgeous in this very end of summer, beginning of fall. So welcome to you. Now, following up on what Andy said, you know, Andy and I have been thinking some about what your challenges probably are when you get a client and go in to work with a committee. And here are some of the things that we've heard from people in your field. Sometimes the people who come to the galas where you're the auctioneers show up all right, but they don't bring their checkbooks and write big checks. Sometimes the committees don't do as good a job actually planning the events or following through on the things they should do as you'd like them to. Or perhaps you find that board members you work with are timid about pitching the event. Now, we know that all you auctioneers are extroverts and have no trouble pitching because that's the business you're in, but I'll bet some of the board members and committee members you work with aren't such extroverts and are on the timid side. They say they will, but they're not really so good at it. Maybe some of them don't follow through. That's troublesome. And we've heard from several people in your business that more often than they'd like, they go into a committee meeting, their first meeting, and they start talking to their group about how they'd like to see the auction planned, the gala planned. And the response is, gee, that's not the way we've done it. Right? So resistance, right? Resistance is common. Now, we're here to work with you. And let's have the next slide, Curtis. We're here to work with you so that with some simple strategies about being a trainer rather than a presenter, or rather than just coming in with your way, you'll be able to get your board members excited and engaged, to get them to be fearless advocate, great salespeople, even if they're not naturally that, and effective event planners. Now, if we can do that in 15 minutes, boy, Andy, we're magicians if you ask me, but that's what we're trying to get, the road we're trying to go down.
Rock and roll, let's do it.
Yes, next slide. Okay, if you work with your boards in a way that motivates them, that calms their fears, and that helps them function at their best, then you're going to get better results in what you do. They're more likely to invite you back. Your auctions are likely to be more successful. Next slide, please.
So I have this sense that many of us are experts at education because we have been the beneficiaries of both good and bad educational experiences. And so a little thought experiment here, and this is a chance for you to use your chat function. What I want to know is, have you ever been to a bad seminar, a bad workshop, or a bad class? And I suspect many of you are laughing, because most of us have. And what I'd ask you to type into the chat box is, how do you know a bad workshop is bad? How do you know a bad educational experience is bad? So take a few seconds. If you could sort of generate for us the list of the hallmarks of bad, that will be helpful to us. And while they're doing that, Andrea, give me one example. How do you know a bad workshop is a bad workshop?
You know, Andy, I know a bad workshop is a bad workshop when the minute the presenter starts talking, I want to shut my eyes.
Okay.
Right? Isn't that the hallmark? Isn't that the baddest of the bad, that you just want to go to sleep?
You know, my variation on that is the trainer or teacher who talks down to you and assumes that he or she has all the wisdom and that you're there to simply absorb their wisdom.
Right.
That makes me nuts.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it makes me nuts, actually. Well, I can tell that it's not working for me when, instead of thinking about questions I might ask or how I might be involved, I sit there sort of with an attitude.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about the trainer, you know, really? That's not good.
You and I are both professionals in this field, so we may have high standards, but
Right.
I hear a lot of this. So, Curtis, as you're getting anything back in the chat box, go ahead and read off a couple of things that you're getting.
Sure, we are, and some of the comments that are coming in make perfect sense. It's, you know, things like, for example, I'm not taking any notes, you know, 5 to 10 minutes into the thing, or even 30 minutes into it, you know, I'm not even paying attention, or I'm trying to figure out, you know, what's coming up next. How much time do I have left in this thing?
You're looking at your watch, right?
Right, yeah, that, or, you know, people are saying, you know, I think I can get more out of this on my own. I don't need a presenter, or I don't want the expert to tell me. And they're just trying to find a way to, trying to find that time of when this is available afterward, because I'm just not connecting with what I'm hearing.
This is good.
And those are some of the comments that are coming in.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the slide, and I may come back to you for late arrivals. The number one thing we can teach you about this is what it says here. People remember what they do, not what you say. And there's a lot of scientific data on adult learning theory, and I can boil it down to you in about 20 seconds. People will remember about 20% of what you say if you're in front of the room. If you have some sort of visual to present with it, like you're drawing pictures or maybe you're showing a slide, we can talk about that, retention goes up to maybe 30%. But people remember about 90% of what they do. And if you aspire to train your volunteers and your board members to be more effective, you have to give them work to do. And again, we'll give you an example in a minute here, but that's the gist of it. I would also say that people have a lot of innate wisdom. They know more about most subjects than they realize. And your job as a trainer is to draw from them what they already know, as opposed to trying to pour new information into their brains. And at the end of the day, it's a little bit of both. But the more you can draw them out, the more effective you'll be. So I'm going to hand it back to Andrea. She's going to take you through a training model. While we're swapping slides, please go to the next slide. Curtis, is there anything else that came in that's noteworthy?
I think we hit on most of them. I did see a couple, where people just in general say, the best presentations are the ones where the slides actually just help accentuate the point and aren't the presentation themselves. Which, as presenters, I think we've all been on that side, that you don't want to get caught reading slides alone. Yep. People feel like they can read those on their own. So
right.
That kind of thing's happening. And then enthusiasm. There's nothing worse, I think, and a couple of folks have commented in this regard, that there's nothing worse than getting into a presentation and finding out that the presenter just doesn't have the feel, especially for an exciting topic, that it's almost a drag for them to be there, instead of making the people who are presenting or that are trying to learn something there, make them excited about learning. And if you don't have that enthusiasm, nobody else is going to have that as well.
Great.
Andrea, maybe you could take a second and talk about the distinction between being a presenter and being a trainer.
Okay, but I realize that our time is going by real fast, Andy, so you and I have to roll right along here because
Let's do
they
it.
need to be done by in 20 minutes, I think, entirely.
Good.
So let's roll right along. So here's the story. As you go in, having been hired to help organizations with their galas, right? Presumably to organize their auctions. In some cases, maybe they're in their entire gala. You have a choice. You can go in and you can tell them what to do. You can lay it out for them. Or you can actually think about ways to engage them in the process of figuring it out so that they will really buy what it is you want them to buy. They will do what it is you want them to do because they've been engaged in figuring out how to do it. The latter is what we think of as training. And I'm going to give you a really simple 5-step training outline. And yes, I am going to read these 5 steps because if you understand these 5 steps, you can turn almost anything into a little exercise that gets the people you're working with, your committees, engaged in figuring out and making the plans you want them to make. So, and after I go through this slide, Andy and I are actually going to talk you through how it will work in a real live training exercise. And then we'll briefly say, here are some other ways in which you can use this model. But this slide here is a super simple, effective training model. The first part is the hook. All you do when you work with a group and you want to get their attention in the room about a particular project or about a particular topic is that you create a really simple hook. It might be something like, close your eyes and imagine what it would be like if you raised more money in this gala auction than ever before. That's a hook. Gets people thinking about their gala auction. We'll show you another hook when we do our sample exercise. You're taking people from where they were into the subject matter where you want them to be. The second, number 2, that's the setup. You actually describe what you're going to do to get people working on the problem that you want them to work on. You prepare it and you describe the exercise. Number 3, that's actually the exercise itself. That's the activity. You've told them, here, we're going to organize this activity for you to work on this problem. Now you say to them in number 3, go do it. You keep time and you bring them back together for number 4, which is to debrief whatever it is you had them do, whatever that exercise was, to make relevant meaning of it, so that it relates to your organizing an auction or whatever it is, whatever the other skill is that you want them to do. And finally, number 5 is the conclusion, helping the group find the application of what it is you just finished, this little exercise you finished, for the particular process or project you want them to be working on. 5 simple steps, and you can work with someone in an hour. You can go through this process 3 or 4 times even in 3 or 4 exercises to move them into developing and owning a batch of material or content. All right, so let's go to the next slide and we're going to show you how this works. I promise you it'll feel like it makes sense before we get to the end of it. We've picked an exercise that we think of as it's a mingle exercise. It's called Why Do We Care? And we've picked it because as a way of showing you how the training exercise works. It gets people talking to one another about why they care about the organization. So next slide, please. Step 1, why do you care? Here are the objectives of this exercise. It'll help people get acquainted. It helps them build trust. It helps them clarify what's important, sharpen their story, and strengthen their commitment to the organization. Now, when you work with a group of people about an auction and you want them to be able to pitch that auction, their organization, to the people who are going to come to the auction, you want them to be able to do all of these things. You want them to know why they care. You want them to have a sharp, clear story, and you want them fired up to go out and ask other people to help, right? That's what this exercise does. Next slide, please.
So we'll
Andy?
take you through 1 through 5 quickly here. Here's a sample hook. You might say to the group, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you care about this organization? And they'll sit there for a minute and they'll think about it. And you can collect that information from the group, or you can just sort of roll into the next step from there. Next slide, please.
Okay. You'll hand out an index card to each person. And you're going to get them to write down 3 reasons why they care. Now notice, in the hook, you've gotten them started thinking about caring. How much do they care? 1 to 10. Right? You don't necessarily have to get them to say that, but they've started thinking about how much they care. In this part of the exercise, step 2, the setup, they're actually having to write down 3 reasons they care about that particular organization. And what you'll find is that as they write those 3 reasons down, they actually are drawing themselves in closer to the organization. They're figuring out why they care. And that increases that very act increases their commitment. Next slide, please.
Then we get to the guts of the exercise. So you ask people to stand up, and this actually is important. The standing up part, the moving around, gives this exercise more energy. And you tell them to find a partner, share with that partner what you've written, why you care about the mission, the work of the organization. You'd give them maybe 60 seconds. You'd ring a bell, blow a whistle, find a new partner. Do the same thing with the second partner. Ring the bell, blow the whistle, find a third partner. You do 3 rounds, and then you ask them to sit down. Altogether, this takes 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. It goes very quickly. Next slide, please.
All right, they've all done this little exercise. They've all come back together. Now you get to the heart of what you're trying to do, which is always the debrief. This is where they make meaning of their little process, of their exercise. So for this exercise, you might say to the group, how did your answers compare? Did you hear ideas from other people that weren't on your card? How did it feel to talk to people about why they care? Did your pitch change over time? By the way, you'll find that people always say, yes, my pitch got clearer and sharper and better. By the 3rd or 4th time I did it, I was really saying things that mattered. And what was the most compelling thing you heard? Well, you can imagine that if you're sitting there with a group of 10 or 12 or 15 people, and they're each answering questions like that about why they care and why other people care, the energy in the room is going to start to bubble. You're going to feel it. In fact, you'll feel it while people are going around in the activity itself, sharing why they care. Next slide, please.
And this gets us to the so what part. What do we do with this? And in general, you give it back to the group and you say to them, okay, we've had this experience, we've talked about what transpired here. How do we apply this? And if you want to guide the group a little, you can. You can say things like, okay, when you're out talking to your friends and you're asking them to attend our auction, are you going to talk to them differently about it because of what we just did? If you're out soliciting sponsorships from local businesses or auction items, is this going to change the way you talk about our work? How do we use this? Now, from stem to stern, this exercise takes 20 to 30 minutes. It's not a lot of time. And yet it has the ability to get people to sort of engage and think more creatively, and hopefully passionately about why they're involved. Next slide, please.
And in doing so, let me just finish that up for a minute. In doing so, what's going to happen is that they're going to start thinking about the ways in which they can talk about the organization and the upcoming gala to people in the field and do it in a compelling and effective way. And this exercise will help you get them to find their words, which is a whole lot more effective than if you, as the expert going in, tell them how they should be pitching their own organization.
And, I'll jump on this and then I'll hand it back to you.
Yep.
One of my pet peeves, and I work with a lot of boards, is board members often say to each other or to the staff or to me, the consultant, they say, give me the elevator speech. give me the 5 bullets that I'm supposed to say about our organization. And it ends up being automatic and false. People have to find their own 5 bullets. People have to find their own way of talking about it. And as a fundraiser, the best tool you have is your own passion and your own way to articulate that. So this exercise will help people find that.
Let's go back one slide, if we might, Curtis. Because I could imagine ending this exercise by saying to people, from what you heard as you walked around the room talking to other people, what do you think are the points of the elevator speech you will give when you go out talking to people about this gala? Right? You can actually tie this little exercise up into having them come up with an elevator speech. You could even say to them at the end, pull out a piece of paper and write down your little elevator speech based on what it is you've just done. Then pronto, right? Presto, magic. You've gotten them to develop something that is going to be their words, using their passion, having connected with other people from their organization to take out and do your work, which is bringing people who have money and passion to the gala.
So let's say we have a few minutes for questions.
Simple exercise, followed the 5-step model, and now the next slide, Andy and I have written a book, have put together a cookbook of board training exercises, 51 of them, if you will, that are based on getting people to grab onto all sorts of things. We're going to do some of those for you if you're coming to Nashville. We have 4 or 5 that we're going to do with you around this same and simple model, and we'll show you how they work, including developing a whole gala planning time frame. That'll be interesting. So, questions?
We do. We have several questions. Let's see what's come in so far. We'll start here. My clients don't think of me as a trainer. They see me as the expert auctioneer, the auction professional. What do I have to do to help change their expectation or shift their expectation or mindset if I'm going to come into them with something like the exercise that you all have presented?
Interesting.
You want me to take a crack at it first, Andy?
We could come at this from several angles. You go first. I may jump on it a little bit.
I just have a quick one, which is that you don't go in and say, I'm your trainer. You go in and say, let's get this meeting going this way. Right? Everybody think about why you care about this organization, 1 to 10. Now write it down. Now get up and talk to each other. Now let's get going, and this is going to set us off on the right path. So you don't walk in saying, I'm going to be your trainer. You say, let's start out with an exercise. And I promise you, people are going to be happy that you're doing that. Right? People love to be engaged. They're not going to say, we didn't hire you to do an exercise. They're going to say, gee, what a creative way for this person starting. Andy,
so
yours.
I like this answer, and I could conceive of going at this from a slightly different direction, which is whatever contracts you prepare or whatever you include in your promotional material, you say something to the effect of, one of the things you're getting when you hire me is my work to make your committee and your board more effective in how they participate in the auction and generate money.
Oh, I like that too.
And you just lay it out that way. That's part of the suite of services that you are offering. And if somebody says, I just want you to come on the day of the event and do the auction, you certainly have the privilege of doing that. But it sounds like many of you in the business are actually engaged for months in advance of the event. So you might as well make that engagement effective.
Yeah,
next question, Curtis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more good one here. So someone's asking now, if they do what you're asking and they try to implement this, the training and some of these other things, they're saying that's more of their time, that they have to change roles and it's more time and energy, and they feel like they may need to charge more. So if that's the case, but they're not sure their customers will actually pay more, where's the balance there? How do they handle that?
So you want me to make a run at this one, Andrea?
Yeah, why don't you make a run at that one, Andy?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I've thought about this a lot because we talked with some of your colleagues in preparing for the work we're going to do in Nashville, and I can't square the circle. I can say if you want them to participate better, you're going to have to invest more time in them. And if that means charging them more, then that's what it means. And if you hit price resistance, then you have to make the choice. And one way to think about this is you have tiers of service. There's a basic tier of service that costs X, and it doesn't include some of the stuff we're dealing with here, and then you address with whatever fallout happens because you didn't engage them. Or there's a tier Y or Z that costs more money, but they include more of your time and more of your expertise. And the risk here is that people will go for cheap, and they'll end up getting an event that's not satisfying for you or them. But I think you guys live with that risk already.
Okay.
Andrea, I think that's my best shot. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I think that after a while, working with committees, working with groups, you learn that you are always more effective when you engage them, when you don't just come in and tell them what to do, and that it does take a little more time. And my own default is not to want to do projects that I don't think I can be tremendously successful at. So that's my own default, is to say, all right, why should I do something that's going to be lackluster? Why don't I write a proposal where I know I can really make a difference? And actually engaging my committees, if I were a gala a consultant, right, would be one of the things that I know I'd have to do. So I've just gotten to be hard-nosed as I've gotten older. I don't want to do stuff that isn't going to work. Right? It's not good for my reputation. All right.
All right. Well, I do have one more quick question here, and I'll be able to answer this one, and then we're going to have to wrap up and move on. But the quick note, I had a couple of folks ask whether or not today's presentation and slides would be available. Those absolutely will be. We will send that information out after we are done here today. So we want to thank you for everyone for their questions that they submitted. If we didn't get to your questions, we do apologize. It's just we're up against the clock. So thanks for submitting all the questions you did, and thank you to Andrea and Andy for answering those. We are going to move on here very quickly as we wrap things up here today. We do have a poll that we want everyone to take part in, if we can, please. It's part of some feedback that we'd like to get from you. And it's an interactive poll. The first question, you'll see it pop up here, and you'll be able to select it. The first one, it says, I found this session is informative. And this is on a scale of 1 to 5. So if you found it very informative, please rank it a 5. If you found it on the lowest level of informative, please rank it a 1. But it's on a 1 to 5, low to high schedule. And we'll leave that question open here for just probably 10 seconds or so, and then we'll move on to the second question. And I see some folks are going ahead and voting. We do appreciate that. We'll leave it open for about 5 more seconds. And we'll go ahead and close that one. Thank you for voting. We'll move to the second question. The second question is, I found the 30-minute time link to be just about right for what we need out of a webinar. So if you would go ahead again on a 1 to 5, low to high schedule or scale, please vote that. We'll leave it open for about 10 seconds here as well. And again, we thank you for participating in this. This does help us as we move forward. And about 5 more seconds on this one. And we'll go ahead and close that. And then the final question today is, I am interested in attending another iSeries session. Again, 1 to 5, low to high. If you could just give us your quick feedback on that. We'll leave it open for a few seconds here, and then we will wrap up things here today and get you on your way. So just a few seconds here. And that will do it for our quick poll here. We do thank you for taking part in that. That does wrap up the meat and potatoes of today's segment. We do thank you for taking part in the survey and for taking part in today's session. Before we do end today, I did want to note that you can build off of what you've heard here today in just a few weeks, September 14th through 16th in Nashville, Tennessee. The NAA's 2014 Benefit Auction Summit will feature Andrea and Andy, along with other education and events. You can register for that event by visiting auctioneers.org/events or by calling 913-563-5600. 5432. You can also use the number that you see there on your screen, 913-541-8084. Either number will get you where you need to go, and you can get registered and, again, take part in the Benefit Auction Summit that's in Nashville in just a few weeks. And then finally, before we let you go, I did want to make sure that we invite you for the next iSeries session on Wednesday, November 5th. We'll dive into auctions in today's real estate market. We will send you information on this. It's just the same way you got information in for today's session. We want to thank you again for taking part in NAA's iSeries. That does conclude today's iSeries session. Again, thank you to Andy and Andrea both. Thank you to all of you for participating and taking part. And remember, the iSeries exists because it's about you.